So in today's class, we're going to learn about studying the past. So how do historians find out about the past? Well, historians use many different resources. They can use artifacts, primary sources, and secondary sources. So what's an artifact? An artifact is an object that was made by humans during a time period. For example, an arrowhead that you might find in your backyard, that's an artifact. So I included a picture here. Most of you are probably very familiar with the Indiana Jones franchise. Well, he's a historian and an archaeologist, and in this example, in this movie, he goes into a cave system and he finds an artifact, a golden statue. So, what could he learn from just a golden statue? Well, he could learn about the people, in this case, the tribe that made it. He could find out if it was made of real gold, if they used real gold, how they could have made it. He could learn a lot from it. So historians look at artifacts to learn more about a culture or the people that made it. They could learn a lot from artifacts. So a primary source is a source that is a first-hand account written by someone who lived during that time period. So if you wrote a diary about today's class, that's a primary source. You were here in class, and you wrote about it. So probably one of the most well-known examples of a primary source is the Diary of Anne Frank. And the Diary of Anne Frank is a primary source because she lived through her experiences. She wrote about them right after they happened, or a little while after they happened. And it's her own thoughts and feelings, not somebody else's, it's hers. So she has probably what is the most well-known primary source about people in her situation that were in hiding during World War II and what they could have experienced. So a secondary source is a secondary source that is an article. It can be a book or another source that doesn't give a first-hand account. Now, textbooks can be iffy when it comes to if it's a secondary source. So, until another class, you don't need to worry about textbooks right now. For right now, they don't count. So, the example that I gave is the New York Times article on men walking on the moon for the first time. So, the man that wrote this article, he was not on the moon with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. So that he is taking primary sources such as the recordings made by the astronauts and information that NASA has given out, and he is writing about it. So he's writing from another perspective, and so that's not a primary perspective because he wasn't actually on the moon or in the room with NASA. So, or he's not a NASA scientist, that is. So he is giving a secondary look. So, for example, if you wrote what happened in science class yesterday, if there was something that happened and you weren't actually in that class, that's a secondary source. So you're going to go and talk to the teacher or students or look at if there was a camera in the room. Those would be primary sources that you would write about. So you'd be writing a secondary source. So the assignment that we're going to cover today, or you guys are going to do, is you and a partner will be giving one of the following sources. So I will give you either, you'll be doing an artifact, primary source, or secondary source. So what you're going to do with your partner is you're going to look up one example of your assigned source. So for example, and you can't use this because I'm going to use this, but if you wanted, say I went online and I found the death mask of King Tut. So that is an artifact. It was found in his tomb. It was made by the people who lived during that time period. So that is an excellent example of an artifact. So you're going to create a PowerPoint after you pick your pick one of your example, and you're going to create a PowerPoint and explain why and how a historian might use that source. So, for example, the death mask. So I could say, I'm going to think, why would a historian use this? Why would this be used by a historian? Why is it important? So it could be used to see how people made those kinds of objects at that time. It could explain the resources that they were using, the artistic techniques, things like that. So historians have to think deeply, and that's what I would like you guys to do is, why is this important? Why is it important to use an artifact or this primary source or this secondary source? And why would somebody from, for example, if you find something from 9/11, why would this be so important 100 years from now? Why would historians from 100 years from now use that example? And you can't use 9/11 since I just used it. But so why is it important? That is the key thing I want you guys to think about. So you're going to write it and explain why it would be helpful to learn about for the historian to learn from the past and how it would be useful to them in their studies. So I want you guys to go ahead and start brainstorming and think about those things. Another example, if you're going to use a primary source, a map is a primary source if it's from that time period. So, for example, if you find a map from 1866, why would it be helpful to a historian? Well, if it was from Georgia or Atlanta in 1866, that's when Reconstruction was happening in the South. So a historian could find this map and be like, okay, why is this laid out the way it is? Why is there roads that are no longer in use today? Is there roads that aren't here yet that we use today? So those are the kinds of things that a historian might think about, and something that I would like you guys to try and think about. So if you guys are still confused on the difference between primary and secondary source, there is a great and kind of fun YouTube video listed at the bottom of this page. So if you are a primary secondary source person, if you get that assigned and you just need a little bit of help just kind of clearing up those questions, go ahead and watch the video. And if you need any help, please come see me.